Mistress hired someone to scare the pregnant wife. Billionaire saw the CCTV and broke down. In an opulent home, perched on the outskirts of Beverly Hills, a hidden darkness simmered beneath a veneer of wealth. David Harrington, a revered millionaire, known for his lavish parties and sharp business sense, never imagined his picture-perfect world could collapse so swiftly. His beloved wife, Evelyn, was pregnant with their first child, a moment that should have been pure bliss. Yet behind the scenes, a cunning mistress, Sabrina, quietly plotted a terrifying scheme. As a grainy CCTV recording later revealed, danger arrived at their doorstep, threatening the very bond David and Evelyn had so painstakingly built. Now everything was poised to unravel. David Harrington was a man who had grown accustomed to achieving everything he desired, from a modest upbringing in Akron, Ohio, to becoming the CEO of Harrington Technologies, a company pioneering cutting-edge security and home automation systems. His life had been a series of calculated risks and spectacular wins. Media outlets like Forbes and the Wall Street Journal frequently chronicled his meteoric rise. Whispers floated around about his unstoppable ambition, his charm, and his knack for closing near-impossible deals. But those who truly knew David recognized a streak of vulnerability behind his confident smile. He met Evelyn Kaufman. Now Evelyn Harrington, under the most innocuous circumstances, at a tech expo in New York's Javits Center, where Evelyn, a freelance event planner, coordinated press conferences for corporate giants. Evelyn had delicate features, an impeccable sense of style, and above all, a warmth that disarmed people. Unlike the women David typically encountered in high-stakes boardrooms, Evelyn's gentle spirit and ability to see beyond his wealth intrigued him. In a sea of suits and polished technology displays, they found an instant connection. Their courtship was swift and intense. Long discussions over candlelit dinners segued into trips to Nantucket, where they walked hand in hand along quiet beaches, planning their future. David proposed in grand fashion on a yacht off the coast of Capri, with fireworks illuminating the starry sky. Reporters from the New York Post captured the moment, celebrating the union of a self-made millionaire and the graceful woman he adored. From the outside, the Harrington marriage appeared flawless. They settled in an exquisitely modern mansion in Beverly Hills with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the cityscape. Evelyn's creative flair fused seamlessly with David's penchant for luxury, resulting in a home designed to exude warmth and sophistication. Hand-picked art pieces adorned the wall's original works by Banksy Damien Hirst, and even a rare Picasso that David had acquired at an auction in London. Their staff, which included a personal chef, a full-time housekeeper, and a security team, discreetly managed everyday responsibilities, allowing David and Evelyn the freedom to focus on their passions. David was immersed in the expansion of Harrington Technologies into European markets, negotiating joint ventures with high-level executives in Berlin and London. Meanwhile, Evelyn had established a boutique event planning firm, attracting clients like philanthropic organizations, cultural institutions, and even the occasional Hollywood actor. Their combined social circles introduced them to charity galas, private soirees, and star-studded events, making them regulars on the society pages. Yet for all the glitz, there were shadows lurking, specifically the demands of David's relentless schedule. Meetings bled into dinners, phone calls pulled him away at odd hours, and the lines separating personal life from professional ambition grew ever blurrier. Evelyn sometimes felt David's absence, both physical and emotional, even as she prepared to welcome their first child, a baby girl. She tried to be patient, trusting his devotion, but an unsettling sense of unease began to bloom. foreshadowing that the foundation they stood upon could crack if tested by forces they could neither anticipate nor control. When Evelyn first discovered she was pregnant, David's reaction had been one of genuine excitement. He swept her off to a celebratory weekend at the Peninsula Hotel in Paris, their favorite romantic hideaway. They strolled along the Seine, shared pastries at hidden boulangeries, and toasted their unborn child with sparkling cider. For a fleeting moment, life seemed unstoppable in its capacity for joy. But as Evelyn's pregnancy advanced, David's work seemed to intensify in equal measure. With a new branch of Harrington Technologies set to open in Shanghai, David traveled frequently, leaving Evelyn alone in their expansive Beverly Hills mansion. Sometimes a week would pass with nothing more than a few hurried text messages or brisk late-night phone calls. Evelyn understood that he carried immense responsibility on his shoulders, but she couldn't quell her gnawing sense of loneliness. During one particularly quiet evening, Evelyn ventured into David's study, a space she rarely entered, unless she wanted to remind him about dinner or needed to hand him an urgent phone message. Soft golden lamplight bathed the room, illuminating walls lined with books on entrepreneurship, technology, and philosophy. She spotted a letter on his mahogany desk from the Pinkerton Investigative Agency, known for handling high-profile clients' security concerns. Although she trusted David implicitly, she felt a pang of unease about the secrecy implied by that letter. He had never mentioned hiring private investigators. That same week, she began noticing small shifts in David's behavior. He seemed restless, constantly checking his phone. At times, a cloud of worry crossed his features, and he would pivot into an intense business call in a corner, whispering in hushed tones. On a Friday night, instead of their usual dinner date, David texted to say he had an urgent meeting at Chateau Marmont with some old friends. He didn't elaborate further. The abruptness and vagueness of his messages chipped away at Evelyn's peace of mind. As the weeks passed, Evelyn's intuition told her something was amiss. Perhaps it was the heightened sensitivity that came with pregnancy, but she sensed David was holding something back. Anxiety's secrets, or perhaps a burden he felt he couldn't share. She recognized the importance of transparency, especially with a baby on the way, and found herself torn between confronting him and preserving the delicate peace they still maintained. Despite her suspicions, Evelyn chose to believe in her husband's goodness. He had never given her any reason to doubt his loyalty in the past. She reassured herself that his furtive behavior was simply a byproduct of high-stakes business dealings. After all, the stakes were growing. Harrington Technologies was on the verge of launching a revolutionary home security system. Competitors had eyes everywhere, and David needed to remain vigilant to avoid corporate sabotage. Yet in the midst of these rationalizations, a single troubling thought persisted. She was no longer certain that David was telling her everything. An undercurrent of unease pulsed through the halls of their mansion, and the first seeds of doubt took root. The mistress's appearance in David's life might have been predictable to onlookers who were well versed in Hollywood's rumor mills and corporate gossip. Sabrina Delacroix, a rising marketing consultant, exuded a magnetic confidence. Tall and striking with dark wavy hair and piercing hazel eyes, Sabrina had built a reputation for her persuasive pitch techniques and bold business strategies. She had been contracted by Harrington Technologies to spearhead a high-profile marketing campaign for their latest product line. Their initial professional rapport was undeniable. David admired Sabrina's knack for thinking outside the box, and Sabrina, in turn, recognized an opportunity to latch onto a man with both financial clout and social prestige. What began as a professional collaboration quickly spiraled into late-night brainstorming sessions over whiskey, intimate dinners in exclusive restaurants, and emotionally charged exchanges about life ambition and the future. Sabrina had a knack for making David feel seen and appreciated during a period when Evelyn, often tired from her pregnancy, was less available both physically and emotionally. It did not take long for sparks to ignite. David wrestled with guilt and shame, understanding all too well that he was breaching the vows he had once regarded as sacred. Yet in Sabrina's company, the pressures of corporate expansion, fatherhood, and a changing relationship with Evelyn seemed to momentarily fade. Sabrina listened attentively to David's frustrations about funding battles, boardroom politics, and the complexities of balancing his personal and professional life. She flattered him, and he starved for validation, feasted on her admiration. Sabrina, for her part, was hardly the innocent bystander. She had dreams of climbing the social ladder, and David Harrington was the perfect rung. She relished the lavish gifts, extravagant getaways, and the sense of power she felt when stepping into VIP events on David's arm. Journalists at Variety magazine sometimes speculated about the new woman seen at the side of the elusive entrepreneur, though no direct evidence ever surfaced that David had strayed from his marriage. Behind Sabrina's polished exterior, however, lay a calculating mind. She studied David's company, his ambitions, and his vulnerabilities with surgical precision. She noted the tensions in his marriage and recognized a chance to consolidate her hold on him. The pregnancy, far from deterring her, only heightened her determination to secure her place. She believed if David were truly committed to Evelyn, he wouldn't be stepping out. Why not push to make their affair official? There were fleeting moments when David tried to cut ties, conscience stinging, but Sabrina's emotional manipulation pulled him back every time. If he seemed distant, she would create an artificial crisis, fabricating issues at work or dropping hints about rival firms, courting her expertise, sparking David's protective instincts. Yet in Sabrina's carefully orchestrated pursuit, she overlooked Evelyn's quiet strength. Sabrina knew Evelyn existed as a gracious, pregnant wife, the figure David publicly adored, but she underestimated how formidable a foe Evelyn could become if pushed too far. And so with each passionate rendezvous, Sabrina moved closer to her ultimate goal of ousting Evelyn from David's heart, completely unaware that her plans would spark events that spiraled out of everyone's control. Tension seeped into the once peaceful Harrington home like a slow, inevitable leak. Evelyn sensed David's ever-growing distance. He still showered her with sporadic gifts, like a limited edition Hermes handbag or a custom cradle for the baby's nursery, but these tokens felt hollow without the shared intimacy that once defined their bond. When she tried to arrange a simple evening at home, David would cancel last minute, citing urgent client calls or travel commitments. Gradually, the staff began noticing the fractures too. Chef Miguel, who had worked for David since his bachelor days, saw how Evelyn would pick at her food appetite, dwindling not just because of pregnancy nausea, but also from emotional strain. Camilla, the housekeeper, sometimes found Evelyn alone in the baby's nursery, gently rocking in a chair, tears glistening at the corners of her eyes. Neither dared to pry. It wasn't their place to comment on private matters, but an unmistakable cloud hung overhead. During one particularly strained weekend, David finally joined Evelyn for a prenatal checkup at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. The doctor conducted an ultrasound, pointing out their baby girl's forming features. Evelyn reached for David's hand, expecting a moment of tender solidarity, but his palm felt clammy and disengaged. His mind was clearly elsewhere. Even the rhythmic thump of their baby's heartbeat on the monitor couldn't fully anchor his attention. Later that evening, Evelyn confronted David in a rare moment of candor, standing on the balcony that overlooked the sparkling city lights, she mustered the courage to speak her heart. "We're growing apart," she said, quietly. Tears in her voice. "I feel so alone in all of this." David, visibly uncomfortable, slipped his phone into his pocket. "Work has been insane." "Eve. The deals in Shanghai, the new marketing campaign, everything. You know, I love you. Once this launch is done, I'll have more time." She wanted to believe him, but something felt off. There was an undercurrent of secrets in his words, an invisible barrier keeping them from reconnecting. Despite her instincts telling her to dig deeper, Evelyn chose to let it go for the sake of preserving the fragile peace. After all, the baby's health depended on her maintaining a stable emotional environment. In the following days, David's pattern of late nights and unexplained absences persisted, fueling Evelyn's suspicions. She sometimes glanced at his phone lying on the counter, noticing unknown numbers flashing on the screen or cryptic text messages that made her heart clench. Paranoia grew, and she found herself checking social media or tabloids, terrified she might stumble upon a scandalous tidbit exposing her husband's infidelity. Yet even in her heightened state of anxiety, Evelyn held hope that this was merely a rough patch, that once the baby arrived, David would ground himself and refocus on family. Little did she know that Sabrina's ambitions were quickly escalating, pulling David deeper into a treacherous whirlpool of deceit. And with each passing day, the threads binding David and Evelyn's marriage began to fray, threatening to unravel altogether. Sabrina Delacroix prided herself on her ability to remain calm under pressure. She had navigated cutthroat business negotiations and thrived amidst corporate sharks who underestimated her. Yet her experiences had taught her one unwavering truth: to secure what you want, you sometimes had to eliminate whatever stood in your way. And in her eyes, Evelyn Harrington, pregnant or not, was the biggest obstacle to her future with David. She began to strategize meticulously. First, she studied David's schedule down to the last minute, ensuring she knew his whereabouts at all times. She kept track of Evelyn's doctor appointments, gleaned from stray bits of information David let slip during their private meetings. She even went so far as to install covert tracking software on David's phone, an easy feat given her access to Harrington Technologies' internal resources and her savvy with hacking tools. It didn't take long for Sabrina to realize that Evelyn spent most evenings alone, reading or quietly preparing for motherhood. Beyond the occasional social gathering or prenatal class, Evelyn's world had shrunk to the confines of their mansion. That solitude presented an opportunity Sabrina intended to sow fear, to make Evelyn feel unsafe, in hopes that David would be driven even further into Sabrina's arms. Her first step was subtle, an anonymous phone call to the mansion's main line in the middle of the night. When Evelyn answered, the caller breathed heavily, but said nothing, then hung up. Sabrina repeated this tactic 3 times in a week, noticing David's frustration at the prank calls, but also seeing how they rattled Evelyn. However, the payoff was minimal. David upgraded their home security system, ironically, from his own company's latest offerings, and urged Evelyn to remain calm. Sabrina realized she'd have to escalate. After extensive planning, Sabrina sought out a local small-time thug named Marco Hawk Hernandez, with underworld connections in Los Angeles and a reputation for intimidation. Marco was the perfect candidate to execute a harrowing but controlled scare. Sabrina explained her demands. No one should be physically harmed, at least not severely. But the message needed to be crystal clear. Make Evelyn fear for her safety. She parted with a hefty sum of money, wired discreetly into Marco's offshore account, and left him with a stark warning: that no direct link should ever trace back to her. In the darkest recesses of her mind, Sabrina rationalized this plan as a means to an end. She believed she truly loved David. If Evelyn's terror made her reconsider her position in his life, or if it forced David to think of Sabrina as his only refuge, then Sabrina would claim victory. Fear, after all, could be a potent tool. Yet in orchestrating this dangerous charade, Sabrina failed to consider one critical element. David's new and advanced security systems products of Harrington. Technologies themselves were designed to capture every movement, every flicker, every suspicious sound. So while Sabrina concocted her scheme, a silent web of digital eyes and ears waited ready to capture the moment her dark intentions came to fruition. Late autumn winds swept through Beverly Hills, rustling the palm fronds, and sending the air swirling with a cooler bite than usual. The Harrington mansion, with its sleek glass walls and meticulously trimmed lawns, glowed invitingly against the dim starless sky. Inside, Evelyn sat on the plush living room sofa, her feet propped up on an ottoman. She sipped a cup of chamomile tea and tried to calm her nerves. David had left earlier that evening for a sudden business meeting with Sabrina, though Evelyn believed he was simply working late at his office. She was used to his unpredictable schedule, but a subdued sense of dread nagged at her tonight. Shortly after midnight, Evelyn prepared to go upstairs. The baby was particularly active, small kicks nudging her sides. She paused to lay a hand on her belly, letting a faint smile touch her lips. In a few weeks, she'd hold her daughter in her arms. The thought simultaneously comforted and terrified her. Then came a noise, a sharp metallic clang from the backyard. Her heart jolted. The security system beeped quietly, indicating motion in the perimeter. She reached for her phone to check the camera feed, but before she could open the app, the mansion's electricity flickered. The lights went out, plunging the entire space into darkness, except for the faint glow of emergency backup lamps. Evelyn's pulse raced. She considered calling David or security, but the phone line was strangely dead. A chill crawled up her spine as she realized whoever was outside had likely severed the lines. Trying not to panic, she remembered the property's backup generator. If she could just get to the security console in David's study, maybe she could turn on the emergency alerts. She never made it that far. Before she could take more than a few steps, one of the glass panels shuddered violently. The lock gave way, and in seconds a dark figure slipped into the living room. Evelyn froze. She couldn't see his face. He wore a black ski mask, but his presence radiated menace. He had the imposing stature of someone who could overpower her easily. "Stay back," she screamed, one hand protectively cradling her stomach. The intruder didn't speak. Instead, he lunged forward, grabbing Evelyn by the arm and shoving her against the sofa. Fear ravaged her senses. She could smell his sweat, feel the rough texture of his gloves. He hissed in a low voice, "Don't make a sound." He brandished something that glinted in the faint light, a knife. Evelyn's mind raced. She had to protect her unborn baby. She tried to steady her breathing, tears stinging her eyes. The attacker yanked her hair, pulling her head back as though to deliver a brutal message. But then something startled him, a beep from a hidden sensor perhaps. Realizing he was running out of time, he leaned close to Evelyn's ear. "Tell your husband he can't keep you safe." With that ominous whisper, he fled. Leaving the living room's glass door shattered, the entire ordeal had lasted only a few terrifying minutes, but it felt like a lifetime to Evelyn. Collapsing onto the floor, she gasped for breath, adrenaline and shock coursing through her. In her mind, just one thought kept looping over and over. Why would anyone want to do this to me? In the immediate aftermath of the attack, law enforcement, flooded the Harrington residence. Detective Lisa Montgomery from the LAPD took the lead, methodically gathering evidence and overseeing forensics. A tall, no-nonsense woman with dark hair, slicked back into a tight ponytail, Lisa spoke calmly as she interviewed a trembling Evelyn. Ambulance medics hovered nearby, checking Evelyn's vitals to ensure no harm had come to the baby. Though shaken, Evelyn insisted she was fine physically. At least David arrived nearly 30 minutes later, breathless and wild-eyed. He had been en route from a private dinner with Sabrina when he saw the frantic messages, his face contorted with shock and remorse as he pulled Evelyn into a tight hug. Evelyn sobbed against his chest, partly in relief that she was safe, partly in residual terror. "I'm so sorry," David murmured over and over. For a moment, his presence felt reassuring, a reminder of better days. Evelyn clutched his shirt, grateful he was there, but confused by the swirl of events. That evening, David insisted they stay at a hotel for safety, but Detective Montgomery informed them that she'd need David's help to review the Harrington Technologies security system. Once law enforcement had combed the premises, David led the detective to the heart of his high-tech control hub. A row of monitors, some still flickering with static, sat behind a secured glass panel. Despite the intruder's attempts to disable the system, the backup drives might have recorded everything. David worked his way through encrypted files until he found the correct timestamp. Sure enough, the cameras had captured the masked intruder's approach, albeit from a distance. They could see him cut the wiring near the side gate, slip into the yard, and methodically pick the lock. Then came the living room, feed, grainy, but unmistakable. The figure cornered Evelyn, brandished a knife, and whispered something in her ear, before escaping. A wave of nausea churned in David's gut as he watched the terror in his wife's eyes. But there was more. In the corner of the camera's wide-angle view, the reflection of a second figure's face flickered for a split second in the glass. Detective Montgomery had the video replayed in slow motion. It was fleeting, almost imperceptible. However, upon closer examination, they saw a woman outside, staying hidden in the shadows. The image was blurred, but a single detail stood out. A distinctive tattoo along the side of her neck, a stylized Lily David's breath caught in his throat. He had seen that tattoo before, on Sabrina Delacroix. A swirl of horror and disbelief clouded David's mind. Why would Sabrina be anywhere near his house that night? None of it made sense, unless Sabrina was somehow behind the attack. David knew Sabrina had a cunning side, but to stoop this low. He glanced over at Evelyn, who was huddled against Detective Montgomery. She looked fragile but resolute. David realized that everything, the tension, the doubts, and now this vicious assault tied back to secrets he'd been keeping. Guilt wrapped around his heart like a vice. He might have inadvertently invited the devil into their home, and the tapes had just laid bare a devastating truth. That night, David booked an entire floor at the Four Seasons Hotel for extra security. It was a knee-jerk reaction to ensure Evelyn and the unborn child were safe. Upon arrival, a swarm of bodyguards from Harrington, Technology's elite security team, stood by scanning every corner, maintaining vigilant watch. But even with the physical safety measures in place, David felt helpless. The real threat, he realized, lay within the tangled web he had woven by letting Sabrina into his life. Evelyn retreated to the bedroom suite, exhausted and emotionally drained. Her doctor had prescribed mild sedatives to help her rest and protect the baby from the stress-induced chaos that had rocked their world. As she slept fitfully, David sat by the window, staring out at the city lights. His phone buzzed incessantly. Calls from business associates, PR teams and lawyers all demanding to know what had happened at his residence. He ignored them. He couldn't ignore his conscience, though memories assaulted him. Sabrina's first flirtatious smile, the thrill of her attention, the guilt every time he kissed her, and the helpless sense of addiction that kept him returning to her. Tonight, all those moments crystallized into a sickening realization that his betrayal might have nearly cost him Evelyn's life and endangered his child. Grappling with shame, David's body shook. He had always prided himself on being a man of control over markets, negotiations, and even relationships. But now he felt like a puppet yanked around by the consequences of his reckless decisions. Tears burned at the corners of his eyes, and he allowed himself to weep silently. This was the first time he could remember in years letting go of the stoic facade he habitually wore. In a burst of desperation, he grabbed his phone and scrolled through his messages. He found Sabrina's number and typed a flurry of texts. David 1:37. AM, we need to talk. David 1:37. AM, what were you doing near my house tonight? David 1:38. AM, don't lie to me. I saw you on camera. No response. David weighted his heart hammering in his chest. He typed again. David 1:45 AM. If you don't tell me the truth, I'm going to the police and naming you. Still no reply. Tension rippled through his limbs. He wanted to lash out, throw a lamp, do something, anything, to relieve the crushing weight on his chest. Instead, he sank into a nearby armchair, head in his hands, reeling from the knowledge that he'd broken his vows, and in doing so had endangered the people he loved most. Even if Sabrina was behind this, David wondered how he could possibly redeem himself in Evelyn's eyes. How could he explain that he had naively let in a woman who cared more about power and control than love? A wave of hopelessness gripped him. He needed to act, to come clean, to gather every bit of evidence, and ensure Sabrina never threatened his family again. But first he had to face the darkest mirror of all, the one reflecting his own betrayal. When morning came, sunlight filtered softly through the heavy hotel drapes. Evelyn awoke in the sumptuous suite, feeling somewhat disoriented. For a moment, she forgot why she wasn't in her own bed. Then a flash of memory jarred her. The intruder's gloved hand, the cold glint of a knife, his ominous whisper. Her pulse quickened, and she pressed a hand to her belly, checking for her baby's movements. The child was calm, though her own heart roared with anxiety. She found David in the sitting area, phone in hand, eyes ringed with exhaustion. Upon seeing her, he moved to her side, gently kissing her forehead. "Are you okay?" he asked, voice husky from a sleepless night. Evelyn's throat felt tight. She wanted to scream to demand answers, but all she managed was a shaky nod. She still loved him, yet she also felt betrayed, even though she couldn't fully articulate why. Something about his demeanor, the tension in his words. It confirmed her lingering suspicion that there was more to this story. As if reading her thoughts, David took her hand. "We need to talk." He began exhaling heavily. "But first, let me check on the security team's update." He stepped outside the suite to speak privately with a guard, leaving Evelyn alone with her thoughts. She wandered into the bathroom, splashed cold water on her face, and caught sight of herself in the mirror. She looked pale, frightened, so different from the self-assured woman she'd been a few months ago. More than anything, she wanted to protect her child, and that meant finding out who had attacked her, and why Evelyn began piecing together small, unsettling details she had overlooked. David's late nights, the hush-hush phone calls, the perfume scent on one of David's jackets that definitely wasn't hers. It all pointed to a harsh truth. David was likely having an affair. But how this connected to the attack remained a haunting question. Despite the swirling doubts, Evelyn was no pushover. She had built her own successful event planning firm from the ground up. She understood the nature of business, the unscrupulous tactics rivals might use to undermine Harrington Technologies. Perhaps it was corporate espionage, but her gut told her otherwise. A knock at the door jolted her from her thoughts. Detective Montgomery stood there, wearing the same grim expression as the previous night. She wanted to interview Evelyn further about the attack. Any details about the intruder's voice build or words? Evelyn explained everything she recalled. He said, "Tell your husband he can't keep you safe," she whispered. A tremor coursed through her as she spoke the words again. Detective Montgomery narrowed her eyes. "This seems personal," she observed, quietly making notes. "We'll know more once our forensics team has analyzed the footprints and any hair or fibers left behind. Also, we're cross-referencing the security footage to identify a second figure on the premises." Evelyn's chest tightened. She realized she might soon learn the real identity of the figure lurking outside, and if it was who she was, beginning to suspect the heartbreak would be devastating. But she needed the truth, no matter how shattering it might be for her own safety and the safety of her unborn child. That afternoon, David paced the length of the hotel suite phone, clutched tightly in his grip. His calls to Sabrina remained unanswered, but to his grim relief, a single text finally arrived. "Sabrina 1, 10 p.m. I don't know what you think you saw, but it's not what it looks like. Don't contact me again." Her brazen denial ignited David's anger. He wanted answers. Without a moment's hesitation, he slipped on his jacket and left, telling Evelyn he needed to address urgent business. Though Evelyn tensed, she didn't protest. She had questions for him, but the shock of the attack was still too fresh. She watched him go, a swirl of anxiety mounting in her chest. David's driver took him to Sabrina's upscale apartment complex in West Hollywood. He bypassed the doorman with a curt nod and took the elevator to her penthouse suite. The corridor was silent, lined with plush carpeting that muffled every step. He reached her door and banged on it urgently. After a tense minute, Sabrina opened the door. She wore a robe loosely tied at the waist, her hair disheveled, as though she'd only just woken up. For a fleeting second, David felt the familiar pull of attraction, but it was quickly consumed by rage and guilt. "What the hell were you doing near my house last night?" he demanded, pushing past her into the living room. The space was modern and tastefully decorated, but filled with a sense of tension that mirrored his own. Sabrina crossed her arms over her chest, her eyes flashing. "You have some nerve barging in here like this." David clenched his fists. "Cut the act. I have video footage placing you at my house around the time Evelyn was attacked." A masked intruder broke in and nearly hurt her. "Hurt my child." Sabrina's face shifted, a flicker of fear dancing across her features. I didn't break into your house." "Yes, I was in the neighborhood. I had a meeting close by." Her tone dripped with unconvincing nonchalance. "But I had nothing to do with that break-in. How dare you accuse me? You hired someone." David pressed voice, low and furious. "You wanted to scare Evelyn. Maybe you didn't intend for it to go so far, but it did. Now the police are involved and they have your face on CCTV." Sabrina's composure cracked. Her eyes darted around the room as though seeking an escape. I thought her voice trembled. I thought if she felt unsafe, maybe she'd leave you. You'd realize she's holding you back and come to me fully. She swallowed hard. "I didn't know. The guy I paid would bring a knife, I swear." David stared at her in horror. So it was true. The woman he had let into his life had orchestrated an attack on his wife and unborn child out of jealousy. He felt bile rising in his throat, a dizzying mixture of rage, guilt, and disgust. "You monster!" He spat. "You nearly killed them." Tears threatened to spill as he thought about Evelyn's terrified face. "I'm going to the police. I'm turning over the footage and telling them everything." Sabrina's expression transformed into raw panic. She lunged for David, grabbing his arm. "No, you don't understand. My career, my reputation, it'll be ruined. I'll go to jail." "Please, David, we can work this out." He wrenched free from her grasp, suddenly aware of how dangerously entangled he had become in Sabrina's deranged scheme. "Consider yourself finished," he said, voice cold with finality. "Stay away from me. Stay away from Evelyn." He turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. The echo of that door reverberated through the hallway, signaling the end of whatever twisted liaison they had shared. All that remained now was the reckoning. Back at the Four Seasons, Evelyn tried to steady herself. She closed her eyes, taking deep breaths as she felt her baby's gentle movements. Stress wasn't good for either of them, and with David gone, she felt more alone than ever. But she couldn't just sit and wallow. She needed answers. She needed to protect herself and her child. Detective Montgomery was her first call. The detective arrived within the hour, wearing an empathetic expression. "We've cross-referenced the partial footage and done a preliminary identification," Montgomery explained. "We believe the second figure in the yard is Sabrina Delacroix. We're working to confirm her involvement. But it's enough to proceed with further questioning." Evelyn nodded, a wave of nausea rolling through her. So it was true David had been unfaithful, and his mistress had orchestrated a violent attack. There was no other explanation. Yet as much as her heart felt shattered, she recognized the immediate priority was her safety, and the safety of her unborn child. At that moment, a new visitor arrived, Matthew Clarkson, a close friend of David's, and an attorney with a reputation for tackling high-stakes cases. Tall, composed, and impeccably dressed, Matthew wasted no time in offering his assistance. "I understand you've been through a terrible ordeal," he said gently. "David asked me to support you in any way possible. He'll explain everything once he returns." Evelyn was cautious, but Matthew's presence was oddly comforting. He and David had been college roommates at Stanford, and their bond ran deep. Matthew's brand of loyalty was unwavering. In fact, he had helped David negotiate critical mergers and fend off hostile takeovers in the past. If he was here, that meant David intended to confront the entire mess directly. "I want Sabrina charged." Evelyn stated her tone resolute. "She orchestrated an attack on me. I won't rest until she's brought to justice." She felt a flicker of anger beneath her sorrow, a righteous indignation that demanded accountability. Matthew nodded. "I'll work closely with Detective Montgomery. We'll gather all the evidence, file a restraining order if necessary, and ensure she faces the legal consequences. But we need David's full statement and the security footage to seal the case." Detective Montgomery placed a reassuring hand on Evelyn's arm. "We'll do everything we can right now. We're searching for the man who actually broke into the house. Once we have him in custody, it'll strengthen our case against Sabrina." Evelyn closed her eyes, exhaling shakily. The baby gave a small kick, as if sensing her turmoil. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice quivering. Despite her vulnerability, she felt a sliver of relief. At least she wasn't alone in this fight. Yet as the detective and Matthew discussed the legal roadmap, Evelyn's mind drifted to David. Where was he right now? What confession would he make upon his return? The dread of having her suspicions confirmed churned in her stomach. But she needed to hear the truth from him, no matter how painful it might be. Because only by facing that truth head-on could they chart a path forward, or decide if there was any future left for them at all. David arrived back at the hotel around sundown, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion and shame. He found Evelyn in the sitting room, dressed in a loose, flowing maternity gown, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked fragile, yet resolute. In the corner stood Detective Montgomery and Matthew Clarkson, both wearing expressions of quiet solemnity. "Eve." David began, voice trembling slightly. "We need to talk alone." He gestured for the detective and Matthew to give them privacy. They stepped out softly, closing the door behind them. Evelyn braced herself, arms folded over her swollen belly. She locked eyes with him. "You had an affair." It was not a question, but a statement of fact. David felt his throat tighten. "Yes, he managed." "I was weak, I let myself." He shook his head, as though trying to dispel the memory Sabrina was hired to lead a marketing campaign. She was captivating. It started as just a mistake. But then I got in too deep. Evelyn's eyes shone with tears. "How could you?" Her voice broke. "We're about to start a family. Did our marriage mean so little to you?" The question cut him deeply. It meant everything, he whispered, stepping closer. "I never stopped loving you. I was overwhelmed, foolish. I let my ego and my ambition blind me. I've been drowning in guilt, and then, last night..." He stopped, tears pooling in his eyes. "You could have died, Eve, our baby." Despite her anger, Evelyn felt a surge of empathy. She had loved David deeply for years, but she couldn't ignore the betrayal and the danger it had brought upon them. "Do you realize how this changes everything?" she asked, voice wavering. "How can I ever trust you again?" David reached out gently, taking her hands in his. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. All I ask is for a chance to make it right, to protect you and our child, to sever all ties with Sabrina, to let the authorities handle her. I want to rebuild what I've destroyed, if you'll let me." Evelyn closed her eyes, tears coursing down her cheeks. She remembered their wedding day, how David had promised to stand by her in sickness and health, how she had never questioned his devotion until now. "There's a lot we need to work through," she said at last. "Right now, our focus should be on safety and on bringing Sabrina to justice." David nodded relief, mingling with sorrow. "Agreed." He paused, then added in a strained voice, "I confronted her. She admitted to hiring the intruder, but claimed she never intended to harm you physically." Evelyn's face hardened. "That doesn't absolve her. She put our baby in harm's way, out of her own selfish obsession." Before David could respond, Detective Montgomery and Matthew stepped back in. Montgomery held a phone in her hand, an urgent expression etched on her face. "We've just apprehended the suspect who broke into the house," she said. "Marco Hernandez. He's confessed to receiving payment from Sabrina Delacroix. We have enough to press charges. It's time." The weight of those words settled over them all. The final showdown had arrived, and there would be no turning back. Sabrina's fate and the course of David and Evelyn's future now rested in the hands of the law. In the days that followed, news of the attempted assault on Evelyn Harrington broke across local headlines. The Los Angeles Times ran the story under the banner, "Millionaire's Wife Targeted in Shocking Home. Invasion. Mistress Alleged Mastermind." Reporters camped outside the Four Seasons, trying to glean details of the scandal. Conspiracy theories abounded on social media, with gossip channels speculating on the nature of David and Sabrina's affair. David's PR team scrambled to craft statements, while Evelyn struggled to maintain a sense of normalcy. despite the chaos swirling around her. Sabrina Delacroix, meanwhile, was arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit burglary assault and attempted harm to a pregnant woman, charges compounded by the presence of an unborn child. In a desperate attempt at damage control, she hired a high-powered defense attorney, claiming she had no knowledge that Marco Hernandez planned to use a weapon. But the evidence was damning, and Sabrina's recorded confession, combined with the security footage, painted a damning picture. For David, the aftermath extended beyond legal entanglements. Shareholders at Harrington Technologies questioned his judgment, and rumors swirled about board members contemplating a vote of no confidence. David had to stand before them, acknowledging his personal failings, but reaffirming his commitment to the company's mission. Ultimately, the cutting-edge security products his firm had developed, ironically, played a significant role in unmasking the criminal plot. This fact helped mitigate some of the shareholders' concerns. They saw a strange validation in the system's effectiveness. At home, or rather in their temporary hotel residence, David and Evelyn tried to navigate the emotional wreckage. David moved heaven and earth to ensure Evelyn felt safe, hiring additional security, constantly checking in, staying by her side as much as possible. Yet trust was not something he could rebuild overnight. He attended counseling sessions by himself and pleaded with Evelyn to join him in couples therapy once she felt ready. Initially, Evelyn resisted. The wounds were too raw. She would sit by the suite's bay window, gazing out at the city that had become a crucible for her heartbreak. The baby's kicks were a constant reminder that she had to stay strong for the life growing inside her. Slowly, she began to accept that if they were to have any chance of mending their family, they needed professional help. In a small, warmly lit office in Century City, they began therapy. Dr. Candace Robertson, a middle-aged woman with a soothing voice, gently guided them through the tangled pain of infidelity, betrayal, and fear. Some sessions ended in tears, others in heated arguments, but with each session, a faint glimmer of hope emerged. David made full confessions about his affair, detailing his emotional state and how he had felt lost under the immense pressure. Evelyn, though deeply hurt, ventured to share the loneliness she had experienced during her pregnancy. Dr. Robertson reminded them that healing was a process, one that demanded honesty, accountability, and time. While Sabrina awaited trial and Marco Hernandez negotiated a plea deal, David and Evelyn focused on their unborn daughter. Preparations for the nursery resumed, albeit at the hotel. Amid tears, regret, and tentative steps toward forgiveness, they found a renewed sense of purpose, bringing their child into a world where at least her parents were fighting to mend what had been broken. Weeks rolled by, and the final trimester of Evelyn's pregnancy brought new challenges. Her body felt heavy, and the emotional toll of trauma weighed on her heart. But in counseling sessions, she found a small measure of clarity. She still loved David, despite his betrayal. Despite the pain, love didn't simply vanish in the face of hardship. It either transformed or withered, depending on the choices made. David, for his part, launched a personal transformation. He stepped back from many of his corporate responsibilities, handing the reins of certain projects to trusted executives. This act of delegation, something David once found nearly impossible, signaled that he was ready to prioritize his family above all else. Instead of late-night dinners with clients, he spent evenings reading parenting books, helping Evelyn with her prenatal yoga routine, and attending every obstetrician appointment. A new sense of vulnerability blossomed in David. Where he once flaunted an aura of unflappable confidence, he now admitted his flaws and the depth of his remorse. Therapy sessions proved crucial, as did open communication. If Evelyn felt a surge of anxiety, David would sit with her until it passed. If David felt the urge to isolate himself in shame, Evelyn would remind him that part of rebuilding trust was staying emotionally present. Sabrina's trial date arrived at last, a media spectacle that garnered national headlines. The prosecution presented an airtight case, financial records linking Sabrina's accounts to Marco's security footage, text messages extracted from her phone that corroborated her planning. Sabrina's defense attorney tried to argue diminished responsibility and emotional duress, painting Sabrina as a woman driven by love. The jury, however, was unimpressed by these tactics. After days of deliberation, they delivered a guilty verdict. On the day of the sentencing, David and Evelyn stood hand in hand in the back of the courtroom. Sabrina, her once polished appearance now haggard, shot them a desperate, pleading look. She received a prison term for her conspiracy to commit harm, ensuring she would be behind bars for the foreseeable future. As the gavel banged, Evelyn felt a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief that justice was served. Sorrow for the ruin Sabrina had brought upon herself. Finally, the day came that eclipsed all other events in David and Evelyn's life, the birth of their daughter. A bright, cool morning in Los Angeles found them racing to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, where Evelyn's labor progressed faster than expected. David stayed by her side, holding her hand through every contraction. After a few intense hours, the cries of a newborn filled the delivery room. The baby girl arrived healthy and strong, her tiny fist curled around David's finger. Tears flowed freely, uniting both parents in wonder and gratitude. They named her Aurora Grace Harrington, symbolizing a new dawn breaking through the darkest night. In that moment, the heartbreak, betrayal, and terror of the past months receded, holding Aurora. David and Evelyn felt a surge of love more powerful than anything they'd ever known. Their journey was far from over. The road to full healing would be long, filled with challenges and memories that stung, yet in Aurora's innocent eyes, they saw the promise of a future, redeemed one where they might find renewed strength and unity forged by the trials they had overcome together. Thank you for joining us on this tumultuous journey of love, betrayal, and redemption. In the face of sabotage and danger, David and Evelyn discovered that true commitment can endure even the most harrowing trials. Sabrina's sinister plan may have threatened their world, but it also shattered illusions and forced them to confront deeper truths. Through confronting their fears and failures, they found resilience not just for themselves, but for the life of their precious daughter, Aurora. If this story resonated with you or kept you on the edge of your seat, please take a moment to show your support. Like this video. If you felt the suspense, share it with friends who enjoy captivating drama, and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss more real-life fiction and gripping stories. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the darkest storms can lead to the brightest dawn.